doubt there's anything more important for citizens to sit and discuss than a democracy. And you'll see why I say so in a moment. You're looking at the logo right now of the UTD program. And if you notice it, it is a calabash, which is being passed from one hand to another. As our name says, African Youth Development Fund, it is the job of the adults within a democracy to equip young people with civic rules and how to behave as a citizen within a community. And therefore, this is why you're seeing the calabash passing hands. And umkhabulo, you know, in Zulu, when a child is born, for 3 months, they are probably not seen by strangers in a fear that bazokhabula. So this is to inhale. In other words, we are coming with a program where we want people to catch democracy rather than just to be more on a teaching phase. And the other end of umkhabulo is during the struggle days. I'm sure some of you who are my age, more or less, remember that we used to have activists go to township and actually conscientize the communities that there is a cause, there's a fight to be fought in order to liberate Black South Africans in South Africa. Hence this term, umkhabulo, the democracy. What is the purpose of this program? We've got 3 purposes that I'm going to talk to. The first one is to contribute to solving the problem of a general lack of civic knowledge in South Africa. Now, I'm sure all of us, those who were around, remember this day in 1994, and those who were not around, the queues were this long. We were moving from oppression to liberty. We were excited, we were expectant. Finally, what we've been fighting for so long has arrived. The one thing we did not know, though, which I didn't know, is liberty is not freedom. Notice that one. Just because you are outside does not mean you are free. The biggest prison that we have is between your ears. There are people right now who are roaming around but are not free. And there may be people who are in prison but are freer than the people who are outside. Don't forget that liberty does not equal freedom. You remember the song by Bob Marley where he said, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." So let's talk a little about freedom. What is freedom? Because that's what we got in 1994. You can see here a lion at the zoo. I'm sure we can all agree that a lion at the zoo is not free, right? A lion at the zoo is restricted. It cannot have anything it wants to do. It is oppressed. Now, let's imagine that you were powerful and you went into the zoo and you freed the lion, drove it into the wilderness, and pronounced, "Lion, thou art free. You are free." The question becomes, what is the lion free to do? Please think about this. It is free. What is the purpose of its freedom? What is it free to do? And an answer to that is it is free, among other things, to hunt. It is free to hunt. As soon as the lion is a free lion, one of the things that ceases to happen is it stops receiving a free meal from the zoo. The lion at the zoo was not free, but the one thing it was guaranteed is a meal. And once it is free, it is no longer receiving a free meal. This is a very important metaphor to grasp, because I'm sure you've heard people who say it was better under apartheid. We had jobs, we had order, X, Y, Z. When you hear people saying that, that is nothing but a nostalgia of a lion remembering the zoo. Yes, it got a meal, but it was at the price of freedom. Now, here's a question. What would happen to our lion if it didn't hunt? It is free and it doesn't hunt. It will starve. Sooner or later, if it does not hunt, it will die. And the question is, what would have killed the lion? Some people say it is hunger. No, it's not hunger. What would have killed the lion is freedom. Because the most important thing to know about freedom is deadly to a lion that is not willing to hunt. Freedom, I'll repeat that, is deadly to a lion that is not willing to hunt. Freedom will kill you if you are not willing to get off your butt and start hunting. And I believe this is one thing that we didn't know, that actually freedom equals responsibility. When we say you are free, what we actually mean is you are now responsible. Now, sometimes as South Africans, because we don't understand this concept, we behave like a lion that's been freed, it's in the wilderness, it chills at the wilderness, and it comes when the zoo is dishing out food, joins the line, receives the food, and says, okay, Irie, I'm happy with the food. I will see you next time when you're dishing. It doesn't work like that. Once you are free, you are responsible. That is one of the key things to understand. The purpose of freedom is to hunt. The purpose of freedom is to say, I am now responsible. And that has certain consequences, which we're going to talk about. Right. So where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. If we don't know the purpose of freedom, we will abuse it. And looking at the unrest, the unhappiness that we are feeling about democracy, we can just come to one conclusion. As South Africans, we have abused freedom. And one of the major things that is a lack is that in 1994, when we got this new car called freedom or democracy, we never got the manual. People were not taught, they moved from oppression to freedom, and it was assumed that we'll operate there automatically. Now look at that last statement. Democracies thrive best if citizens have a broad education at some levels of political knowledge. Now, that's the first goal of what we want to teach people what is democracy, how to behave as a democratic citizen. The next thing is to say, to empower people with skills to use democratic tools. Now, this morning, as we're coming to work, I'm sure you see the news, the Heidelberg Road is blocked. There's burning barricades there, and somebody can be excused for saying South Africa is burning. If you look at the saying there, it says, if a hammer is the only tool you have, you tend to treat every problem as a nail. So this is the tool that we used in fighting apartheid. But now we've won our freedom. We are now in a democracy. The question is, do we have the tools for democracy? And because we don't have the tools for democracy, we are using the only hammer that we have, and we are applying weapons of fighting oppression within a democratic dispensation. So that's our second purpose, teach people the tools of using the tools that you use in democracy. The third part is to influence the mood of young people towards democracy. You know, I'm sure you've heard people complain, young people are not interested in democracy, they are apathetic, etc. If you think of the saying that says you can take a horse to the river, but you can't what? You can't force the horse to drink. But what you can do, you can give the horse salt. And when the horse receives salt, it will be thirsty and drink out of its own volition. That's our third reason. Now, the fourth one is important because remember, what is freedom? Freedom is responsibility. Once people are responsible and they're in a democracy, it is important that they understand and accept the rights, that's number one, and the responsibility among citizens that will maintain and improve our constitutional democracy. If there are dishes in a zinc, no one else is going to wash them in a democracy unless we as citizens wake up and wash those dishes. So those are the goals of this program. So what is democracy? Democracy comes from Greek. It is a composite word made up of the word called demos and kratos. Demos is people, kratos is rule. Therefore, democracy is a rule of the people. Abraham Lincoln put it very nicely at Gettysburg. This is what he said. He said, democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. I'm sure you know those words, right? But they are very critical because they describe democracy very well. It is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Let's talk about a metaphor of a democracy as a house. Let's imagine that your grandfather leaves you in his will a house, but you never get to know that this is your house. And as you grow up in that house, you somehow think that the servants in the house are the owners of the house. What's going to be your behavior in that instance? Without a question, you're going to be subservient. You are going to be grateful for the food that the servants keep you. You'll be grateful that you have a bed and a room in that house until you know that it's your house. Just think about the paradigm shift that gives to you. You thought you were a servant. You thought you were a recipient of benevolence from the servants. And you thought the servants owned the house. But now you find out this is your house. How's that going to change your thinking? I'm sure you can imagine. The first thing is you'll want the best room. It's your house, right? If you want to move from brown bread to white bread, you are not going to ask the servants. You're just going to command them and say, I want white bread, right? Very critical. Because if you understand that within a democracy, the people are the owners of the house, then you understand that the people are responsible for the house. Let's say I passed your house and your house had an unkept garden. It had thistles and thorns and rats running around. Who am I going to blame? Think about that. I'm going to blame you. You are the one of the house. You are responsible for the keeping of your house. Now, imagine if I say, hey, why is your house like this? And you say to me, no, it's a fault of my servants. That doesn't make sense, right? Now, if your gardener is not doing the job, what do you do to the governor? To the gardener. It's an obvious thing, isn't it? You just fire the gardener if they cannot, or if they are not willing to do the garden, you fire the gardener. Do you toy going to your gardener's house? Do you burn your furniture? Burn your microwave? Just because you are angry that the gardener is not doing the garden? Of course you don't do that. That is why this paradigm is so important. Understanding that you are bequeathed freedom, and this house is a gift that you've got from your grandfather. Now, like any house, there are very important components that makes a house a house. Not any structure is a house. The most important part of the house is what? Is the foundation. Now, the foundation of a democracy is freedom. And that's what we got in 1994, freedom. If we understand it to mean what it really means, which is responsibility. So if a democracy does not have a free people, it will not stand. What does that mean? It means that those people are free, they make decisions out of their own accord, and they take responsibility. Please don't miss this one. Because as I go through this metaphor of democracy as a house, we'll get a clue or an inkling of what may be a problem within our country. Now, well, let me just ask a question. If you live in a monarchy where there's a king, what are the people who live in a monarchy called? They are called subjects. They are the subjects of the monarchy. But within a freedom, people are called what? They are called citizens. And the word citizen is Greek for co-ruler, which means as citizens, we are all free, responsible people, and this house is ours, and we are the co-owners of the house. So instead of calling somebody a citizen, and maybe they ask you, which citizen, I mean, what country are you a citizen of? And you can say, no, I'm actually a co-owner of South Africa. right? I am the core ruler of South Africa. In other words, that's saying I'm a citizen in South Africa. Now, there was a study that was published in the Afrobarometer. You can go and Google this. Amazing results where they found that 75% of South Africans said if you can end crime, create jobs, get rid of potholes, get rid of load shedding, they are willing to get rid of democracy and get a dictator if that can be guaranteed. And it seems like a small thing that we're saying. As long as we can get all these things, it's fine. We are willing to trade our freedom. So this brings us to the topic of today when we are advertising, which says, who is king? And to explain this, I'm going to tell you a story of a gentleman, Benito Juarez. Juarez was a freedom fighter in Mexico. He was one of the people who were responsible for liberating Mexico. So he's like a Mandela or a Tambo of Mexico. So Mexico was under Spain, and the king of Spain was aware that there was a lot of turmoil as people were fighting for freedom in Mexico. So he sent a new governor. And when this governor came, all the freedom fighters were in jail. So Juarez and his lieutenants were in jail. This new governor called the lieutenant of Juarez. We'll call that Lieutenant Pablo. And he said, Pablo, tell me, what is Juarez like? And you can imagine when you asked maybe whoever about Tambo, what is Tambo like? I mean, we had glowing memories of those people. So Pablo is saying, hey, Juarez is a man of the people. He loves the people. He sacrifices for the people, you know? And the governor says, so tell me, what is it that Juarez want? What are you fighting for? And Pablo says, well, we want land. Juarez is fighting for land. And the governor says, well, I want to give people land. He says, what else does he want? He says, well, we want education. We want jobs. He says, well, I want to give people the jobs. I want to give people the education. So he says, so you see, there's no reason for us to be fighting. What you want is what I want for the people. So Pablo runs to Juarez and he's excited. He says, Juarez, this guy is very good. He says he wants the very thing that we want. He wants to give us land. He wants to give us freedom. He wants to give us education, jobs. So there's no reason for us to be fighting for this. And Juarez says, Pablo, what is democracy? So Juarez stops and he says, well, it is land, it is jobs. But he says, well, this man is able to give us all these things without democracy. So then democracy is not those things. What is democracy? What is it that this man is not giving us that we're fighting for? And Pablo is quiet. And Juarez said something that I never forget. And he said this, in a monarchy, if a king is bad, he changes the people. In a democracy, if a president is bad, the people change the democracy. That's why freedom is important, because democracy is a right of a people to determine their destiny. It is the right of the house owners to make the house what they want it to be. And once you understand this, then you understand something very important. Let me just talk briefly about the four walls of the house. The front wall is the executive, right? So we know that. So what do? As the owners of the house, we hire people to work in the front wall. Who's the first servant that we hire? It's the president. Now look at that term. That term president does not come from king. It comes from the root word presider. So in other words, it is somebody who's presiding over a minute. This is one of the core owners who will say, hey, you are going to chair the meeting, right? And the president appoints the cabinet, that is ministers, right? Now look at that word minister. The word minister is servant. Can you see? Even the terms are telling us you have a presider who's presiding, who's having servants who are serving who? The co-owners. The right side of the house is the legislature. That's the parliament, right? That's where we say, Madam Speaker, because that's the leader of the house, right? Out of order, all those things. Point of order. Those are happening in parliament. What is the job of the right wall? The job of the right wall is the members of parliament who have voted there, their job is to make the laws. They write the laws, which the president uses. And like any wall of the house, the houses of the wall are connected, but they are separate and they balance each other. And then the third part, the back wall, is the judiciary. We know that. It's led by the Chief Justice. Chief Justice Zondo has just resigned, and we have a justice lady for the first time in our country. And they are in charge of all the courts. And the fourth and most important wall is the free media. Because if you're going to run a house, you need information, right? If you're going to hire servants, you need information as to who are you hiring and why are you hiring them. So all this brings me to this point. I've got good news and bad news for you. Now, which one do you want first? I'm sure you're saying you want to hear the bad news first. Okay, let's get the bad news out of the way. The bad news is it's your fault. The challenges that we have in our country are our fault. Why? We are the owners of the house. The dysfunctional hospitals, the potholes, everything that is wrong in our country is our fault. And that is the bad news. And until we face up to that, and that is the burden of responsibility, you have to face up to that fact that it is my fault. You are not going to be able to do it. Right? So I'm sure this is not good news, and you're now ready for the good news. Right? Are you ready for the good news? Yeah, the good news. The good news is it's your fault. The good news, it's your fault. And I'm sure you're thinking, Klantla, how can you say the bad news is my fault, the good news is my fault? Well, the good news is your fault because if it is your fault, you can fix it. That's the good news. Once we know we are owners of the house, once we know that freedom is responsibility, once we know that we are co-rulers and it is our responsibility, right? Our job is not just to hire servants, right? No company can work if you hire servants and then you go and you let them on their own. Your job as the owner of the house is to manage the household, is to monitor the delivery, is to fire the servants who are not working, is to reward the servants who are going the extra mile, is to be vigilant to make sure that your house is in a state that you want to keep in. So that is the good news, although it may sound like bad news at first. And this is where we're going to end today. We have lots more, right? We have lots more that we can talk about in terms of civic education, in terms of what we as co-rulers who have the responsibility of looking after our country, how can we go about it? I hope you enjoyed today, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Musa.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanta, for that quite amazing and inspiring and insightful introduction to our UTP program. Applauses are going off galore. I can see them in the screen, hearts in the air. And colleagues, if you notice in the chat, I've inserted there a link. That link will take you to a feedback form. If you could please just take 1 or 2 minutes to just answer it, it will allow us to make sure that the service goes from good to great. But at this time, I do want to welcome anyone who has any questions. You will notice there, if I can just share my screen so you can see what I'm seeing. You'll notice there in Teams, up at the top, there is a whole bunch of teams. All right, you'll notice there at the top is a whole bunch of icons. Okay, it's not letting me. That's fine. At the top of Teams, you'll notice that actually raise a hand. Here we go. It's finally cooperating. If you click on that, it will allow you to raise your hand. It will indicate to us that you want to join the discussion. You want to us directly where you can pose your question. And while the colleagues find that button, Tantla, There is a comment or a question here that has come up that I'd love for you to speak to. I believe it is, let me just scan there. Bear with me.
Should I go to chat?
Yes, please go.
Okay.
Technology is technology.
All right. Maybe you can mute them. It's just
Fantastic.
Thank you, Musa.
Thank you, Musa.
So the question that I see here, it's saying, please help us understand how we help citizens own the truth of their responsibility in managing the house. Great question. This is from Charles. Hey, Charles, how are you doing, sir? Great to see you here. It's a very important question, Charles. And I believe the first step is exactly as I said. We need to alert people that you are the owner of the house. That knowledge is going to be a catalyst, right? Just in that example that I made, as soon as you understand that this is your house, it changes how you look at things. Now, imagine if you are in that house and you are in that, going back to the metaphor, and you're thinking that the owners of the house are the servants, and they say there's a meeting to discuss the things that are going to be bought for the house. Are you going to attend the meeting? No, right? I mean, the equivalent obviously is in every municipality, there are IDP meetings, which are there to develop the independent plans of the municipality, which is supposed to be developed by the citizens. But because the citizens think the house is owned by the servants, they're not going to show up in the meeting. But as soon as you know that this is your house, of course you show up in the meeting. Of course. I mean, what else are you going to do? It's your house. Who else are you expecting to go and discuss your house? So, Charles, I believe that's the first and most important thing. We have to start with knowledge. We have to start with changing the philosophy. You understand? Because once you understand that, then it frees you to do things. You understand? When you go into elections, you understand I'm hiring servants for my house. So what's uppermost in your house? Who can do gardening? I don't care you're black, I don't care you're white, I don't care you're Indian. And it's not an issue of racialism and all these things that are brought into place. It is a simple matter of, as the owner of the house, you have a responsibility of the house, and your interest is in hiring the best person for the house, period. Right? If a servant doesn't work, you fire them. You don't go and say, ish, this servant, the grandfather used to do such a good job for me. Yes, the grandfather did a good job. You understand what I'm saying? And this is not being political. It is a principle that we have to adopt. Because if we change parties without changing that paradigm, guess what? Even if you can change servants, if they know that the owner thinks they own the house, they'll work hard for the first few minutes where they come. If they know that they won't be fired, then pretty soon you're going to get the same results, right? So we have to change the incentives. And in order for us to change the incentives, we have to change the paradigm. I believe that is the first step. And that's why I encourage you to spread this. Let us just spread this knowledge because it is freeing. That's what I've seen. Sure.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Ntantla. I'm going to go through your mic. Don't switch it off.
Yes.
Charles has said there, I'm not convinced.
Yes.
Many want to believe it's their house. People give away their responsibility very often, even with the right knowledge, because the responsibility is seen as too heavy. Sadly, an important point there.
Yeah. Charles.
There's also a hand raised here from Lindiwe.
Okay.
This is Lindiwe Dlamini.
Okay.
Lindiwe, I have just given you the ability to speak through us through your mic. Can you hear us? And while Lindiwe is finding her mic, we also have someone here, Brandon Isaacs. He's saying, brilliant, Ntantla. Once the owners grasp that the responsibilities is theirs, what some of their actions we can implement to course correct. I love that one.
All right.
So Lindiwe, can you hear us? Are you able to speak? Please unmute yourself on your side. While Lindy is finding her mic, we also have Seth Naika here as well. They are also having their hand raised. Seth, I've also provided you with a mic. It's up to you to unmute on your side and speak to us.
Yes, hello. So good to be with the amazing organization of AYDF and the speaker of grandeur excellence, Mr. Nhlanhla Zwane. Halala Nhlanhla. So I just want to say I love the metaphor about thinking about democracy as a house. I'm wondering though, what kind of a house? Is this if it's a house with servants, then maybe we need to change the system. Can't it be a house where we serve one another? Can't it be a house where there's no top-down leadership, but we kind of co-work the fields? Is it a house where some of the servants are house servants and field servants? Those kind of metaphors complicate the reality. And then the other one, Nhlanhla, is to think about the concept of it's our fault. And I think for those of us who are aware of active citizenship and being involved, yes, it's our fault. But I think in the terrain of youth and young people, and I don't say this in a demeaning way to youth and young people, but some young people don't know the power of their voice and the power of their activism. Many young people today are becoming aware of their personhood and humanity without an acknowledgement that there's activism. So some of us who must take the fault, we must take the blame, fine. But there are many youth that are marginalized and don't even have what we know. They don't even know that there's a house, leave alone how the house should be, what kind of a house should be. It's kind of modern slavery. Sometimes people are working without a contract because they don't know they have a right to have a contract. So, yes, those are my comments to you, sir. And I'd love to hear your excellent Nhlanhla Zwane, two storms, two claps with a splash kind of response. Halala.
Hey, Seth, brother. Great to see you. Thank you for those wonderful questions. Charles came back and said he's not believed. He's not convinced, and he's hitting on a very important point there. And it is that people want to run away from responsibility. It is easier to blame than to say it's my fault. It is easier to point a finger than to take responsibility. So, Charles, I agree with you in a way that I actually think that if most of us knew that 1994 was a lion getting out of the zoo, I believe if we are aware of the weightiness of the responsibility, some of us might have said, no, we don't want to get out of the zoo, right? Actually, we hear most people saying, no, we want to go back to the zoo. We want to be fed. We want to not have the responsibility. We want somebody to be responsible for us. Unfortunately, you are free, you are free. Ketile, ketile. There's no undoing that. Once you're free, you are free. So it's a very important point that you're saying. And you can't run away from the responsibility because if you do, you cannot run away from the consequences of that, right? If you don't clean your house, it will have cockroaches, it will have rats, you will have disease, you will suffer, right? Because your decisions have consequences because you are the owner. So coming to my big friend here, Seth, the part of are we equal? Yes, the word citizen is co-ruler. So as citizens, we are equal. But what we do have, remember when our grandfather gave us this house does have a budget to hire servants, right? And who are the servants? The servants come from the co-ruler. So in other words, I'm a co-citizen, we're citizens together, and I want to raise my hand and say, you know what? I think the rule in the executive, that job I can do. You see what I'm saying? So when one of the so the equality is in being citizens, not at all. We are absolutely equal as citizens. We are co-rulers. We own this house, right? But the people who are going to be servants are going to come out from who? From the citizens. Does that make sense? Like when Pick and Pay was owned by, the family of the founder, right? The founder as chairperson, he's playing a role there. Do you understand? Which is paid. The founder's son as the CEO, Are you with me? They have a job. And now they're not treated as a son. They're treated as what? As a CEO. They are paid, but they're held responsible. You understand? Because if you are there as a core ruler, as a core citizen, then we are unable to hold you accountable. That's the best way I can answer you. That don't worry about equality, we're equal. There's no house niggers or field niggers in this instance. We are all core citizens. We have a house, and we just have to co-determine how to run the house. And therefore, we look amongst ourselves and say, okay, citizens who would like that job in that wall 1, where there's executive, you want to be president. What is your job? Your job is to lead. Yes, that is a job, but it is a job, right? It's not right because the king cannot be fired, but the president can be fired. So we talk among this, and you say, you know what? We think Seth says he wants that job. Charles says he wants that job. We interview them as core citizens, and then we reach a joint decision and say, yes, we think Charles is better than Seth. Right? So the equality is from the citizenship. That's the most important thing. And you mentioned a very important thing about the children. The children only hear what we do. By our practice, we are teaching our children how to behave in this house. One of the funniest things is I've noticed something very strange. I have a beautiful daughter and the son. So my granny, I was brought up by my granny for some time because my mom was at school, and then my mom came in. My granny taught me to wash my under trouser and socks every time after I finish washing in the morning. So I do that. So as an adult, there were times where I was not so diligent in doing that. I noticed something very funny. When I'm diligent about doing that, my boy does that. I haven't told him. I never once sat him down and said, after washing, wash your, and not once, but I see he's doing it. And that is the same thing with our young people, is they're watching what we're doing, right? They are watching how we're treating this house, and they're learning. But more than learning, remember the name of the program is Ukhabula. Bayakhabula. They catch how to act within this. So when we are subservient, when we are complaining, when we are behaving as if it's someone else's responsibility, that's what our children are learning, right? So I hope I have answered that. But we're going to have more of these sessions, and we're going to deal with them.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for that response.
Sure.
Lindiwe, unfortunately, is unable to join us. She seems to have an issue with her equipment, but she did say, where do I start? The house owner's mindset is still hung on loyalty to the servants and not being able to critique freely and end up being dependents rather than in power. And then we also had someone here, Kumalolina, who was struggling with sound. And thank you, Nguli, one of our team members who's in the meeting, who has indicated to her that it's fine on his side. It should be your equipment, so please try to adjust it there, Lina. We also have another hand raised here in Tlantla.
Let me answer, Lindiwe, so I don't forget the question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So Lindiwe, this is so important, hey? Because if you think you are right, or you think you can succeed, you are right. If you think you can't succeed, you are right. It's all in the mind. It's all in the philosophy. The owners are not loyal to the servants. No, they think the servants own the house. That's why they are loyal. Do you see what I'm saying? The perceived loyalty is coming from a point of view that you think these people own the house. You think they're the one who are giving you the food. You think they're the one who own the money. You're not aware that, no, the treasury is somebody who is managing your money, right? And you give them the order. So I honestly believe in this point. And the reason I believe in it is we've been spreading the message, and everywhere I've shared this message, people get released just like that. Are you with me? So once somebody, why would you be loyal to your servant? Right? If you love your servant, no problem. You can contribute, you can help them, you can give them clothes, but you don't give them the job. right? You can feel sorry for them. You can love them. You can whatever. Yes, you can, invite them. You can, but not a job because the job talks about the house, right? And there we're not joking, right? Because we have to leave this house to our generations. We have to pass it on. We inherited it. We have to pass it on, and we have to pass it on, God willing, with people in a better position than we found it. And currently, I am sad to say that the house, in some instances, in some ways, is not in a better position than we found it. Do you understand? And it is our fault as citizens. I'm not blaming the servants. Please hear me well and loud on this. I am not blaming the servants, right? So, Lindy, that's my point. The loyalty just comes from the misunderstanding. As soon as you solve that misunderstanding, it's gone. No problems. I believe that with all my heart, because it liberated me. I mean, remember, we're all coming from the same place, right? And that is what I thought. And I used to say, we inherited the party or something like that from our forefathers. No, we inherited freedom. That's what we need to guard, right? And we need to preserve freedom for our children. Are we together? And that is why my brother said, we cannot have people volunteer in those jobs. Because you know what volunteers do sometimes. You are at their mercy. I'm volunteering. So what are you going to do to me? No. We hire you. We want to pay you. If you don't do your job, we're going to fire you. If you do a good job, we're going to increase, And remember, as the owner of the house, this is very important. You are not, a good owner does not abuse the servants. A good leader treats his employees well. We sometimes have the tendency of complaining about the politician, like, the politician is driving a Benz. The politician is wearing a nice suit. It's still from that paradigm. You think you are this is not a house. If it's your house and the servant does a good job, you are happy to pay them well. You are happy to pay them well. And you are happy for them to be happy. So it's not a one-sided thing, but it's all in that paradigm. Are we together? It's all in that paradigm. Okay, so read the next question for me, please.
Wonderful. So we have Lemoga, who is attempting to raise their hand and speak to us. Lemoga,
yes,
just now.
Lemoga.
Is Lemoga.
Yeah.
Apologies. I've just allowed your mic. Please unmute. And while Lemoga finds his mic, there are some comments here that
it's a mic.
Was it a her?
Yes.
Let me find some comments here while she finds the mic. I'm going to use your mic going forward.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Apologies. Looks like we were muted. Yeah.
Guys, please bear with us. The first time we're doing this. As I was saying, there was a wonderful quote there from Nape that I'm going to read from scratch with the mic on now. Nape said, "What a mind-blowing and thought-provoking presentation. I think we really need to drop the hammer because we seem to always use violence and anarchy all the time whenever we are not happy with our situation in our communities. My view is that the only way the presider will lead this country to prosperity is when the citizens directly elect a president and not through a current system where it's done through political parties." Do you want to react to that very quickly, Ntantla, before I go?
Nape, what a great question. And we are talking to our next session. You are absolutely right. And your point, I'm just going to make this statement and say we'll dive into that in our next session. The house of democracy in South Africa has only 3 walls and not 4 walls. And this speaks to the point that we are just talking to, Nape. I agree with you 100%, but we're going to dive into the mechanics of that in the next session.
Fantastic. Yes, listen, the UTD program is a couple of modules long. This is just a taste for it. And as I've said, we do have a evaluation form. And in that evaluation form, there is a place there where we give you opportunity to actually experience more of this. So please, it's critical, colleagues, that all of us in the room click that link, answer the evaluation, because it's going to allow us to really understand how to best serve you to get the rest of this UTD program. Lemuhang, if you are ready, please pose your question or comment.
Good day. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I suppose I'm not going to make it a question anymore because of the comment you just made about the focus for the future in terms of bringing in more topics. I wanted to actually say that when you look at where we are right now, that is why I really appreciate this session, and it's mind-blowing, and just how you brought it in with a simple analogy of the house. It rests well on the mind, and this is exactly what we are needing. And the point that I've now turned into a comment is that if you look at where we are, it is sounding amazing when you are saying it now that we are the owners and we are appointed servants. However, when you go onto the ground, we then find that this concept then gets, it competes with the reality of where we are at. And I'll give you an example because my point is really linked to the other points of the previous speakers in different formats, where we've got a gap. And maybe the question that we need to be answering is, this democracy, why is it that we are not understanding it at different levels, and we've got a massive inequality in South Africa? We have now what we call 3 worlds, where we've got the burbs, the suburbs, and then the village lives, as well as now we have created this concept of the what I call imikuku, informal settlements. And I'm not saying this because I'm saying they're wrong. I'm just saying this democracy, it seems as if how it was then brought to us, it didn't answer the question that said, what problem are we solving by implementing this solution? Because now we've got imikuku as much as.
Oh, sorry, that was me.
Sorry, Lemu, it was a technical issue there from us. Go ahead, please, Lemu. You said imikuku, yeah?
Unmute yourself.
I am unmuted.
Just go to unmute yourself.
Oh, Lemu, please unmute yourself again. Apologies.
Oh, can you hear me? I'm going on and on.
Ask Keith, where we are saying imikuku. Yes, that's where we lost you, yeah.
Okay, let me not go too much into detail, but I was just saying we now created 3 worlds that now include informal settlements. And we also have now the legacy of institutionalization. And we also then have the business versus the communities. And my point is that this system is really marred by inequality, because somehow democracy, when it landed in South Africa, it did not take into account the reality of who we are as a citizen. So now the question I'm really putting to you is that in helping the young people, and again, this is a contested one, to say when we say young people, who are we talking about? Because you realize that at 40 you are still be called young, but you are not supposed to be called young because you are really an adult. And now young people are seeing themselves as young, and that also just causes some cognitive dissonance in them. So how did they come in and they participate in this house without, because when you come in as well, some of them will tell you, I want to participate. However, first of all, I'm hungry. Number 2, when you come in, you find that there's a smell of a place where people talk languages like abo sabotage, where people talk languages that is political. When you come into business, it's also a network of those people who are in network. And I know, but part of the things of civic education is individual action for collective, individual thinking for collective action. But now then, when they come into these different institutions, they are challenged because they are not able to come in. They are then closed out within the very circles, either from even from being threatened and kicked out. And it shows itself, the animal shows itself in different formats. Like I said, in the political space, it is where you then find that it's like, who are you? When you get into business, you realize that this business is for, you have to find clients and target market. In institutions, you have to be speaking English, such things. So I suppose my request to you is more like, how do we further expand this circle and not ourselves contribute to the current problem that we are seeing while we are trying to solve for this democracy? I hope I'm clear. But thank you so much for the session.
Thank you, Lemo. A very important point. As you're making your comment, I actually thought my granny actually has left the house. She left the house for my mom and my uncles and aunts. And when she left the house, she said she wants this house to be a refuge for her future generations, right? So her great-grandchildren, if one of them is hit by hard times, they need to be able to come, find a place, rebuild, take their air, find rest, have a roof over their head whilst they are building themselves up, right? And the idea is once they've built themselves up, they go on now and move on, right? So your point of what you've mentioned in terms of the oligarchy, where you have some of the core citizens, right? First of all, they're just happy that all other core citizens think that they own the house. They're very happy with that state of mind, and they would like to perpetuate that, right? And they like that because it looks like the things that they are giving out is from their benevolence, right? Not necessarily the assets in the house. So as core rulers, we need to call such people out, be it business, be it politics, any group of the core rulers who are going to organize themselves to disenfranchise other core rulers. We as core rulers need to hold them out. Now, this is different from envy. Please don't mistake the two, because we've somehow now put a halo over envy. And I'll talk to that some other time, because this is going to be a very controversial subject. I'm talking about instances where Umalume is now saying, no, I'm the firstborn, he's Rehamile. You understand? And he's not just doing that to recoup. He's taking it from everyone else, and he's taking all the rights from everyone else, right? So it is our job as co-citizens to call such people out, and we can drill into that. When it comes to the issues of sheikhs, when I was growing up, I was born in 1970, so I grew up under apartheid a little bit. When somebody went to build a sheikh, in our minds, here's what we knew. They are starting. Those who are my age might remind our younger colleagues, they are starting. Such that when you build a sheikh, we're expecting you're starting, you're going to be building, you're going to buy bricks, you're going to do that and build everything at the end of the day. Etwato in Davidton, 1980, that's when people invaded the land. Under apartheid, I was there, I was 10 years. And Etwato was sheikhs only. Go and drive around Etwato right now. There's not a single sheikh in terms of the main housing. Sheikhs are only maybe the rooms that they hire out. And there was not a single cent from government, because people saw themselves as responsible. And what they've built there is better than any RDP house that I have seen. Right? So the issue is freedom equals responsibility. We have a house, but the house is not all there is. Politics is not all there is in terms of freedom, right? It's not all there is. The citizens, actually, one of the barometers of showing the success of the country is the government must, if the government gets bigger than the private sector combined, it's one of the red flags. Once the government gets bigger than the whole private sector combined, it's a red flag, right? And we'll talk about that when we talk about economics. So there are many contentious spaces, etc. But I hope I've touched what my sense is in terms of that. As core rulers, we're not happy that there are people who are poor. We are not happy that there's people who are everything. But let me just throw this controversial point. If we think that all the generations and everybody of my granny are going to survive from the house that she left us were mistaken. Are we together? It is good that it helps them, give them a step or traction to build their life, but not for them to depend on it only. There's something that was said by Nietzsche. Because Nietzsche came with the concept God is dead at the 10th century, moving from the 1800s to the 1900s. Very, very nice. He said, now that God is dead, some people are coming with they are replacing God with the government. Isn't that what's happening in South Africa? Everything we ask, what's the government doing? The government is not God, and the government is not everything. These are citizens who are working on the walls, but there is more than just the four walls. We're just talking about the government. And when we're throwing out everything, and we just everybody now wants to shelter under government. I want a job in government. When I grew up, a job in the private sector was better than a job in government. It's the other way around right now. And once we take that path, it's a steep fall. It's difficult to come from that. We have to correct it. Government cannot be everything, and it's not God. All right, but we'll talk about that in detail. Sure, Musa.
Wonderful. Well, colleagues, we've reached the end of our session, and unfortunately, we do have to stop it here. But as we have been alluding, this is simply the beginning of the conversation. We are going to be communicating with you. We are going to continue to have these webinars. We are going to continue to participate in the Surabulo, the democracy. There's nothing else to do but for me and the AYDF team that helped to put this together, and Zanza for being such a passionate speaker about this subject, to thank him for their time. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the next one. If you're worried about recording and the slides, if you have attended the session, that means we have your email. We will be sending you this video along with the slide within the next business day. So latest Monday, end of business. Ntlanhla, any closing words before we bid our wonderful colleagues goodbye?
Thank you so much, Musa, for doing such a good job.